The spaceship descended slowly through the thick layers of clouds that covered Earth's sky. It was a sight no human had witnessed in centuries. The crew inside watched with wide eyes as the blue glow of their control panels reflected off their faces. The leader of the mission, Daniel Carter, sat at the front, his hands gripping the controls tightly. His grin was unmistakable, a mix of excitement and nervousness. He turned to look at his team, each of them focused on their tasks but unable to hide their own anticipation. Rachel Monroe, sitting next to Daniel, adjusted her headset and glanced at the monitors. Her sharp eyes scanned every piece of data coming in from the ship's sensors. She was the calmest among them, always thinking ahead and preparing for any situation. Across from her, Chris Lane fiddled with a small tool in his hands, even though there was nothing broken to fix. Chris was the engineer, the one who kept everything running smoothly. He hated sitting still, especially during moments like this when tension filled the air. Behind them, Emily Dawson and Jack Miller whispered to each other, their voices barely audible over the hum of the engines. They were scientists, eager to study the planet they had only read about in history books. Emily held a clipboard close to her chest, already jotting down notes about the atmosphere readings. Jack, on the other hand, stared out the window, his face pressed against the glass as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Both of them radiated curiosity, their minds racing with questions about what awaited them below. As the ship broke, through the final layer of clouds, the surface of Earth came into view. Green fields stretched out as far as the eye could see, dotted with patches of dense forest. Rivers snaked through the landscape, glinting under the sunlight. It was breathtaking, almost too perfect to be real. For a moment, the entire crew fell silent, taking it all in. None of them had ever seen such beauty before. Their home planet, once abandoned and left to decay, now looked alive and thriving. Daniel cleared his throat, breaking the spell. "All right, team," he said, his voice steady despite the excitement bubbling inside him. "This is it. We've trained for years for this moment. Let's not screw it up." Rachel nodded, her expression serious. "Agreed, stick to the plan, secure the perimeter first, then we can start gathering samples." Chris rolled his eyes but smiled. Yeah, safety first. Got it." The ship touched down gently on a grassy plain surrounded by tall trees. The engines powered down, leaving an eerie quiet in their wake. For a few seconds, no one moved. Then Daniel unbuckled his seatbelt and stood up, stretching his arms. He grabbed his helmet and secured it over his head. One by one, the others followed suit, checking their equipment and making sure everything was in order. When the hatch opened, a rush of cool air greeted them. It smelled fresh, unlike anything they had experienced on the colonies where they lived. Rachel took a deep breath, letting the scent fill her lungs. "It's amazing," she murmured, more to herself than anyone else. Daniel stepped out first, his boots sinking slightly into the soft ground. He turned back to the group and gave them a thumbs up. "Looks safe enough. Let's move." The team spread out, scanning the area carefully. Chris walked around the ship, inspecting its exterior for any damage from the landing. Emily and Jack wandered closer to the edge of the forest, marveling at the towering trees. Rachel stayed near Daniel, keeping an eye on their surroundings. Everything seemed peaceful, almost serene. For hours, they explored the immediate vicinity, collecting samples of soil, water, and plant life. Emily and Jack worked together, bagging specimens and labeling them meticulously. Chris climbed onto the roof of the ship to get a better view of the area. From up there, he could see for miles. The horizon was painted with shades of green and gold, interrupted only by the occasional shimmer of water. It was paradise, or so it seemed. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the land, the team gathered back at the ship. They compared notes, sharing their observations and discussing what they had found. Emily held up a jar containing a sample of water. "This is incredible," she said, her voice filled with awe. "The purity levels are off the charts. If this is consistent across the planet, we might not need to do much terraforming after all." Jack nodded enthusiastically. "And the plant life is thriving. Look at these leaves. They're completely free of toxins or mutations. This place has healed itself remarkably well. Even Rachel, who usually preferred caution over optimism, couldn't deny the evidence. It does seem promising, she admitted. But we should stay alert. There's still so much we don't know. Daniel clapped his hands together. Tomorrow we'll go deeper into the forest. Who knows what else we might find? Theo fell quickly, blanketing the area in darkness. The team set up camp near the ship using portable lights to illuminate their workspace. They ate a simple meal, laughing and joking about how lucky they were to be part of this historic mission. For the first time in days, they allowed themselves to relax. But as they settled into their sleeping pods, none of them noticed the faint rustling in the bushes nearby. Nor did they hear the soft clicking sounds that echoed through the trees. The planet may have appeared welcoming, but it held secrets that even the most advanced technology couldn't detect. And somewhere in the shadows, something watched them, waiting patiently for the right moment to reveal itself. The next morning, the team woke up early, eager to continue their exploration. The sun had barely risen, casting a golden glow over the landscape. Daniel was the first to step outside, stretching his arms and taking in the fresh air. He glanced at the others as they emerged from the ship, each of them carrying equipment for the day's work. Rachel adjusted her backpack, making sure everything was secure, while Chris checked the settings on his scanner. Emily and Jack were already discussing which direction to take, pointing toward the dense forest that bordered their camp. "Let's head deeper into the woods today," Daniel suggested, his voice full of energy. "We've seen enough of the open area. If we want real answers, we need to go further." Rachel nodded, though she hesitated for a moment. Something about the forest felt unsettling, like it was hiding something, but she shook off the feeling and followed the group as they made their way toward the trees. The ground beneath their feet was soft, covered in moss and fallen leaves. Birds chirped overhead, and the sound of rustling branches filled the air. It was peaceful, almost too peaceful. As they walked, Emily stopped suddenly, bending down to examine something on the ground. "Look at this," she said, holding up a small plant with vibrant purple flowers. "This species doesn't match anything in our database. It's completely new." Jack crouched beside her, snapping pictures with his camera. "If we find more like this, it could mean Earth has developed entirely unique ecosystems since we left." Chris rolled his eyes but couldn't hide his grin. "Great, more stuff for you two to geek out about." The group laughed, the tension easing as they continued their journey. They moved deeper into the forest, the trees growing taller and closer together. The sunlight filtered through the canopy in patches, creating a mosaic of light and shadow on the forest floor. It was beautiful but also disorienting. After a while, Rachel turned to Daniel. "We should mark our path. It's easy to get lost in here." Daniel agreed and handed out small markers for everyone to leave behind. They placed them carefully, ensuring they could retrace their steps later. Despite the precautions, Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Every now and then she glanced over her shoulder, but there was nothing there, just trees and shadows. After hours of walking, they reached a clearing. What they found there stopped them in their tracks. In the center of the open space stood a cluster of stone structures, arranged in strange geometric patterns. The shapes were unlike anything they had ever seen, smooth and symmetrical, yet clearly ancient. The stones were weathered, covered in moss and vines, but their craftsmanship was undeniable. "What is this?" Emily whispered, her voice filled with wonder. Jack stepped forward, running his hand along one of the stones. "It looks man-made, but not by us." Daniel frowned, studying the structures closely. These weren't here when Earth was abandoned. Someone, or something, built these after we left. Rachel crossed her arms, her unease growing. Or maybe before. Maybe we didn't know everything about this planet when we gave up on it. Chris walked around the perimeter, examining the stones from different angles. "There are carvings on them," he called out. "Look at this." The others gathered around him, peering at the intricate designs etched into the surface of the stones. The carvings depicted humanoid figures standing alongside creatures that didn't look entirely human. These beings were tall and thin, with elongated limbs and featureless faces. Their poses suggested some kind of interaction with the humans in the images, but the meaning was unclear. "This doesn't make sense," Chris muttered, tracing the outline of one of the figures with his finger. "Who made this and why?" Emily pulled out her notebook, sketching the carvings quickly. "We need to document everything. This could be the most important discovery of the mission." Jack nodded, snapping more photos. "But what does it mean? Are these aliens? Or some kind of forgotten civilization?" Daniel shook his head, his expression serious. "We don't have enough information yet. Let's keep looking around. There might be more clues." As they explored the clearing, Rachel noticed something odd. The air felt heavier here, almost oppressive. She glanced at the others, wondering if they felt it too, but no one said anything. Instead, they focused on their work, collecting samples and recording data. The longer they stayed, the stronger the feeling became, like an invisible weight, pressing down on her chest. Eventually, Daniel called them back together. "All right, let's head back to the ship. We've got plenty to analyze, and we need to plan our next steps." The team agreed, packing up their equipment and retracing their path through the forest. But as they walked, Rachel couldn't help but glance over her shoulder again. The clearing seemed to linger in her mind, its presence haunting her thoughts. She tried to convince herself it was just her imagination, but deep down, she knew something wasn't right. When they returned to the ship, the sun was beginning to set once more. The team gathered inside, spreading out their findings on the table. Emily and Jack pored over the sketches and photos, debating the possible meanings of the carvings. Chris tinkered with his scanner, trying to detect any unusual energy readings from the area. Rachel sat quietly, staring at the wall as if lost in thought. Daniel noticed her silence and leaned closer. "You okay, Rachel?" She hesitated before answering. "I don't know. Something about that place. It felt wrong, like we weren't supposed to be there." Daniel frowned, but didn't press further. Instead, he turned to the group. "Tomorrow, we'll investigate more. If there's something out there, we need to understand it." No one argued, though none of them could shake the feeling that they were stepping into unknown territory. As night fell, they settled into their sleeping pods, exhaustion overtaking them. Outside, the forest remained silent, its secrets hidden beneath the cover of darkness. But somewhere in the shadows, movement stirred. A pair of glowing eyes watched, the ship reflecting the faint light of the stars above. Whatever it wasn't human, and it wasn't alone. The night passed without incident, or so it seemed. When the team woke up the next morning, they found everything exactly as they had left it. The ship was intact, their equipment untouched, and the forest around them quiet. But something felt different. The air was heavier, charged with an energy that made the hairs on their arms stand up. Rachel was the first to notice it as she stepped outside, her hand instinctively reaching for the weapon strapped to her side. Daniel joined her a moment later, squinting at the trees. "You feel that too, don't you?" he asked, his voice low. Rachel nodded. "It's like something's out there, watching." Chris walked out of the ship, stretching his arms above his head. "Watching what, us? Or just the bugs?" His attempt at humor fell flat. No one laughed. Instead, Emily and Jack emerged from the ship, their faces pale and drawn. They hadn't slept well either, plagued by strange dreams they couldn't quite remember. Emily held a clipboard tightly against her chest, her knuckles white. Jack kept glancing over his shoulder, as if expecting something to leap out of the shadows. "We need to go back to that clearing," Daniel said firmly, breaking the uneasy silence. "There's more to those stones than we realized. If we want answers, we have to face whatever's out there." Rachel hesitated but didn't argue. She knew Daniel was right, even if every fiber of her being screamed to leave this place behind. Chris, however, wasn't so willing to agree. "Are you serious? That place gave me the creeps yesterday. What if it's dangerous?" "It might be," Daniel admitted. "But we didn't come all this way to turn back now. We're explorers. Remember? This is what we signed up for." Reluctantly, the team gathered their gear and set off once again toward the forest. The path they had marked the day before was still visible, though some of the markers seemed fainter than before, as if the forest itself was trying to erase their presence. The deeper they ventured, the darker it became. The sunlight barely penetrated the thick canopy above, leaving the ground shrouded in shadow. When they reached the clearing, the stone structures stood just as they had left them. But something had changed. The carvings on the stone seemed sharper, more defined, as if they had been freshly etched. Rachel approached one of the stones cautiously, her fingers brushing against the surface. "These weren't like this yesterday," she murmured. "They look newer." Jack snapped pictures quickly, his hands trembling slightly. "What does that mean? Did someone or something come here after we left?" Before anyone could answer, a sound echoed through the clearing, a low, guttural growl that sent chills down their spines. They froze, their eyes darting around the edges of the forest. The noise came again, closer this time, followed by the unmistakable crunch of leaves underfoot. "Stay close," Daniel ordered, his voice firm despite the fear, creeping into his expression. He pulled out his weapon, motioning for the others to do the same. Rachel and Chris followed suit, while Emily and Jack huddled together, clutching their equipment like shields. The growling grew louder, accompanied by the sound of movement in the trees. Shadows shifted at the edge of the clearing, too fast to make out clearly. Whatever was out there, it was circling them. Rachel tightened her grip on her weapon, her heart pounding in her chest. "We need to leave. Now." "No," Daniel said sharply. "If we run, we'll lead it straight to the ship. We hold our ground." The decision proved costly. A figure emerged from the trees, tall and thin, its movements jerky and unnatural. Its skin was pale, almost translucent, and its limbs were elongated, bending at impossible angles. Its face was smooth and featureless, save for a wide, toothless mouth that stretched across its head in a grotesque grin. The creature tilted its head, studying them with empty eyes. Chris fired his weapon instinctively, the blast hitting the creature square in the chest. It staggered backward, but didn't fall. Instead, it let out a piercing screech that echoed through the clearing. More figures appeared, stepping out of the shadows. They surrounded the team, their grins matching the first one's eerie expression. "Back to the ship," Daniel shouted, firing his own weapon. The team turned and ran, their footsteps pounding against the soft ground. Behind them, the creatures moved with terrifying speed, closing the distance with every second. Rachel glanced over her shoulder and saw one of them reaching for her, its long fingers brushing against her backpack. She screamed, pushing herself faster. They burst into the forest, dodging trees and leaping over roots. Chris tripped, falling, hard onto the mossy ground. He scrambled to get up, but the creatures were already upon him. His screams cut through the air as the team forced themselves to keep running, tears streaming down their faces. Rachel wanted to go back to help him, but Daniel grabbed her arm and yanked her forward. "There's nothing we can do," he yelled, his voice cracking. "We have to keep moving." By the time they reached the ship, they were breathless and shaking. Emily and Jack collapsed inside, sobbing uncontrollably. Rachel leaned against the wall, her hands trembling as she tried to steady her breathing. Daniel sealed the hatch and activated the ship's defenses, though he knew it wouldn't hold for long if the creatures decided to attack. Outside, the forest remained eerily silent. There was no sign of Chris, no trace of the creatures that had chased them. It was as if they had vanished into thin air. The team sat in stunned silence, the weight of what had happened pressing down on them. Finally, Rachel spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "We shouldn't have come here. This planet, it doesn't want us." Daniel shook his head, though his expression was grim. "It's too late to think about that now. We need to figure out what these things are and how to stop them." Emily clutched her clipboard tightly, her eyes wide with fear. What if they're not the only ones? What if there are more? No one answered. They didn't need to. The thought hung heavy in the air, unspoken but undeniable. Whatever these creatures were, they weren't alone, and neither was the team. As the hours passed, the ship's sensors picked up strange readings outside, pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. Each pulse sent a fresh wave of dread through the survivors, reminding them that they were far from safe. Night fell once again, casting the forest in darkness. Inside the ship, the team took turns keeping watch, their weapons within arm's reach. Sleep eluded them, replaced by restless paranoia. Every creak of the ship, every rustle of leaves outside, made them jump. They knew the creatures were still out there, waiting patiently for their next move. And somewhere deep in the forest, the clicking sounds began again, growing louder with each passing minute. The clicking sounds grew louder as the night wore on, echoing through the forest like a warning. Inside the ship, the team sat in silence, their eyes darting between the monitors and the windows. The sensors showed strange patterns, pulses of energy moving just outside their range of detection. It was as if the creatures were toying with them, testing their limits. Daniel stood near the control panel, his hands gripping the edge tightly. He tried to focus on the readings, but his mind kept drifting back to Chris. Guilt weighed heavily on him. He had made the call to leave Chris behind, to save the rest of the team. It was the logical decision, the leader's decision. But logic didn't make it any easier to live with. Rachel sat on the floor, her knees pulled up to her chest. She stared at the wall, her thoughts swirling. She couldn't shake the image of Chris being dragged away by those things. His screams still echoed, in her ears, haunting her every time she closed her eyes. She glanced at the others, wondering if they felt the same guilt, or if they blamed her for not doing more to help him. Emily and Jack huddled together in the corner, whispering quietly. They had stopped taking notes or analyzing data. Their equipment lay scattered around them, forgotten. Emily clutched her clipboard like a lifeline while Jack fidgeted with his camera, flipping through the photos they had taken of the stone structures. Each image seemed darker now, more menacing, as if the carvings were mocking them. Chris's absence left a void in the group, one that no amount of planning or preparation could fill. They were down to 4 people now, each carrying the weight of what had happened. The tension inside the ship was almost unbearable, but none of them spoke about it. Instead, they focused on staying alive. As the hours passed, the clicking sounds outside grew closer. The creatures weren't hiding anymore. They moved openly, circling the ship like predators stalking their prey. Every now and then, one of them would press its face against the windows, its wide grin visible even in the dim light. The sight sent shivers down their spines, but they refused to show fear. Fear was weakness, and weakness meant death. Finally, Daniel broke the silence. "We can't stay here," he said, his voice firm despite the exhaustion in his eyes. "If we wait too long, they'll find a way inside. We need to move." "Move where?" Rachel asked, her tone sharp. "Back into the forest? To get picked off one by one?" "We don't have a choice," Daniel replied. "The ship isn't safe anymore. If we stay, we're sitting ducks." Emily looked up, her face pale. "What about the mission? What about Earth? Are we just giving up?" Daniel hesitated. He wanted to tell her they could still complete the mission, that they could find answers and survive. But the truth was, he didn't know anymore. All he knew was that staying here meant certain death. "We'll figure it out," he said finally. "But first we need to get out of this area." Reluctantly, the others agreed. They gathered their remaining supplies, packing only what they could carry: weapons, food, water, and a few tools. They left everything else behind. The ship had become a tomb, a reminder of their failure. Leaving it felt like abandoning hope, but staying meant surrendering to the creatures. When they opened the hatch, the forest was eerily quiet. The clicking had stopped, replaced by an oppressive stillness. The air was thick, making it hard to breathe. Rachel stepped outside first, her weapon raised. She scanned the area, her heart pounding in her chest. The others followed, their footsteps muffled by the soft ground. They moved quickly, sticking, close together. The forest seemed darker than before, the shadows stretching unnaturally long. Every sound made them flinch, branches snapping, leaves rustling, the distant call of an unknown bird. Each noise could have been harmless, or it could have been one of the creatures closing in on them. After hours of walking, they reached a river. Its waters flowed swiftly, glinting under the faint moonlight. Daniel knelt by the edge, dipping, his hand into the cool stream. "This might be our best chance," he said. "If we follow the river, it could lead us to safer ground." Rachel nodded, though doubt lingered in her expression. "Or it could lead us straight to more of them." "It's better than staying here," Daniel replied. "Let's keep moving." They crossed the river carefully, using fallen logs as makeshift bridges. The current was strong, pulling at their legs as they waded through the shallower parts. Once on the other side, they pressed on, their pace quickening. The forest began to thin, giving way to open fields. For the first time in hours, they allowed themselves to hope. But hope was fleeting. In the distance, they saw movement, shapes darting between the trees. The creatures were still following them, faster now, their grins wider. The team broke into a run, their lungs burning as they pushed themselves harder. Behind them, the clicking sounds returned, louder and more urgent. Rachel stumbled, falling to her knees. Jack grabbed her arm, pulling her back up. "Keep going," he shouted, his voice hoarse. They ran until they couldn't run anymore, collapsing, in a clearing surrounded by rocks. The creatures emerged from the trees, surrounding them once again. This time there were more of them. Dozens, maybe even hundreds. Their grins stretched impossibly wide, their empty eyes fixed on the survivors. Daniel raised his weapon, firing blindly into the crowd. The blasts hit their mark, sending some of the creatures stumbling backward. But for everyone that fell, two more took its place. Rachel fired next, her hands shaking as she aimed. Emily and Jack joined in, their weapons adding to the chaos. It wasn't enough. One of the creatures lunged forward, grabbing Emily by the arm. She screamed, struggling to break free, but its grip was unrelenting. Jack tried to pull her away, but another creature tackled him to the ground. Rachel turned to help, but a third creature blocked her path, its mouth opening impossibly wide as it let out a deafening screech. "Run!" Daniel yelled, shoving Rachel toward the rocks. "Get out of here!" She hesitated, torn between survival and loyalty. But Daniel didn't give her a choice. He pushed her again, harder this time, and she stumbled forward. Tears streamed down her face as she climbed over the rocks, escaping into the darkness. Behind her, the sounds of struggle faded, replaced by silence. When Rachel finally stopped running, she was alone. Her breath came in ragged gasps, her body trembling with exhaustion and grief. She wanted to go back, to fight alongside her team, but she knew it was too late. They were gone, just like Chris. For hours she wandered aimlessly, her mind numb with shock. The forest seemed endless, its shadows swallowing her whole. She didn't know where she was going or if she would survive. All she knew was that she couldn't stop moving. Stopping meant giving up, and that was something she couldn't do. As dawn approached, Rachel stumbled upon something unexpected. A small cabin nestled in the woods. Its walls were made of wood, weathered and cracked with age. Smoke curled from the chimney, rising lazily into the sky. For a moment she thought she was hallucinating, her mind playing tricks on her after everything she had endured. But the cabin was real. She approached it cautiously, her weapon raised. The door creaked, open as she pushed it, revealing a dimly lit interior. Inside she found supplies, food, water, blankets, and a radio. A note lay on the table, written in shaky handwriting. "To whoever finds this, you are not alone. Others have survived. Seek the coordinates." Rachel stared at the note, her heart racing. Could it be true? Were there other survivors? Hope flickered in her chest, fragile but persistent. She grabbed the radio, turning it on. Static filled the air, but beneath it she thought she heard voices. Faint, distant, but unmistakably human. For the first time in days, Rachel allowed herself to believe she might live. She adjusted the frequency, trying to get a clearer signal. Outside, the forest remained silent, as if holding its breath. Whatever was out there, it hadn't given up yet. But neither had she. Rachel sat alone in the cabin, her fingers trembling as she adjusted the radio. The static crackled loudly, drowning out any clear sound. She turned the dial slowly, listening intently for a voice, a sign, anything that might tell her she wasn't alone. Her heart pounded in her chest, each beat echoing in the silence of the small room. Finally, through the noise, she heard it. A faint, distorted voice. "Anyone out there? This is Outpost 7. Is anyone receiving this signal?" Rachel's breath caught in her throat. She pressed the button on the radio, her voice shaking as she responded. "This is Rachel Monroe. I'm here. Please, can you hear me?" There was a pause, and then the voice came back clearer this time. "Rachel, we hear you. Stay calm. Where are you?" "I don't know," she admitted, glancing around the dimly lit cabin. "I found this place by chance. There's a note here. Coordinates." "Good," the voice replied. "Read them to me. We'll guide you to safety." Rachel picked up the note, her eyes scanning the numbers scribbled hastily on the paper. She read them aloud, her voice steadier now. The person on the other end confirmed the location and gave her directions. "Follow the path north from the cabin. You'll see markers along the way. Keep moving, and don't stop for anything." "Thank you," Rachel whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. For the first time since the mission began, she felt a glimmer of hope. She packed what little supplies she could carry, leaving behind the things she didn't need. The cabin had been a lifeline, but staying too long would only put her in danger. Outside, the forest was eerily quiet, the oppressive stillness making her skin crawl. She glanced over her shoulder as she walked, half expecting to see one of the creatures watching her from the shadows. But nothing moved. The path led her deeper into the woods, winding between trees and over streams. Every step took her farther, away from the horrors she had faced, but the memories lingered. She thought about Daniel, Emily, Jack, and Chris. Their faces haunted her thoughts. She had failed them. She had run while they fought, leaving them behind. Guilt weighed heavily on her shoulders, but she forced herself to keep moving. Stopping meant death, and she couldn't let their sacrifice be in vain. As she followed the markers, she noticed something strange. The carvings on the trees looked familiar, like the ones she had seen on the stones in the clearing. They were crude, almost rushed, but unmistakably similar. Each carving depicted the same figures, humans standing alongside the elongated, featureless creatures. The images sent a chill down her spine, but she didn't slow down. She focused on the path ahead, her mind fixed on reaching the coordinates. Hours passed, and the forest began to thin. The trees grew shorter, giving way to open fields. In the distance, she saw smoke rising into the sky. Her pace quickened, adrenaline pushing her forward. As she drew closer, she realized the smoke came from a cluster of buildings, a settlement. People moved around, their faces weary but alive. A man approached her as she entered the clearing, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. "You're Rachel?" he asked, his voice kind but cautious. She nodded, lowering her weapon slightly. "Yes. Are you from Outpost 7? He shook his head. "No, but we've been in contact with them. They sent word you were coming. Come inside. You're safe here." Safe. The word felt foreign, almost impossible to believe. But Rachel followed him into one of the buildings, where a group of survivors waited. Their faces were tired, their clothes worn and patched, but they welcomed her warmly. Someone handed her a cup of water and she drank deeply, her body finally relaxing after days of tension. One of the survivors, an older woman named Linda, sat beside her. "You're not the first to make it here," she said gently. "Others have come before you. Some didn't survive the journey, but those who did brought stories about the creatures, the ruins, the carvings." Rachel looked at her, confusion mixing with fear. "Do you know what they are, the creatures, I mean?" Linda hesitated before answering. "We think they were here before us, long before humans ever set foot on Earth. They left when we arrived, retreating into the shadows. But now that we've returned, they're back, and they don't want us here." Rachel's stomach churned. Why didn't anyone tell us? Why didn't the mission brief mention this? "We didn't know for sure," Linda admitted. "Not until people started disappearing. The ruins you found, they're warnings. Messages left by whoever lived here before, trying to tell us to stay away." Rachel thought about the carvings, the grinning creatures, the clicking sounds in the dark. It all made sense now, but the realization brought no comfort. "What do we do?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Linda placed a hand on her shoulder. "We survive. That's all we can do. We've fortified this place, as best we can. If more survivors find their way here, we'll take them in. Together, maybe we can figure out how to fight back." Rachel nodded, though doubt lingered in her mind. Fighting back seemed impossible against something so alien, so relentless. But she had no choice. She couldn't give up, not after everything she had been through. Days turned into weeks as Rachel settled into life at the settlement. She helped fortify the perimeter, gathered supplies, and kept watch during the night. The others shared their stories, piecing together fragments of information about the creatures and the ruins. Slowly, a plan began to form, a way to strike back to reclaim Earth for humanity. But even as they prepared, Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that the creatures were still watching, waiting. One night, as she stood guard, she saw movement in the trees beyond the fence. A pair of glowing eyes stared back at her, reflecting the moonlight. Its wide grin stretched across its face, impossibly wide, impossibly cruel. Rachel raised her weapon, her hand steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. The creature tilted its head, studying her as if amused by her defiance. Then, without warning, it vanished into the shadows. She lowered her weapon, her heart racing. Whatever these things were, they weren't done with her, or with Earth, but neither was she.